Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us. Thank you so much for being part of our 2025 Power Hour series, and welcome to our fifth virtual forum this year, Rethinking Renewables and Community Energy. Across Australia, the energy shift is reshaping regional communities and bringing both enormous opportunity and real challenges, as we all know. These communities aren't just hosting the majority of the new infrastructure, they're also navigating deep social, economic, and environmental change. As the momentum builds, so does the need for us to engage respectfully and effectively, and more than that, actually build genuine partnership with the people who are at the heart of this transition. We know this is really complex work, and we know that there is already great work happening. But as Tony Ma pointed out in episode 19 of our Empower podcast, many communities still feel that the transition is being done to them rather than with them. And that's why we're here. This series is all about lifting the bar, bringing fresh perspectives and insights alongside the voices from real people in regional Australia. And we want to support you, challenge you, and help shape, eventually, better outcomes on the ground. Today, we're driving into the opportunities and challenges of community-led projects, and we're going to hear the real-world challenges, experiences, and also we're going to be asking what it truly takes to move from consultation to genuine partnership with regional communities. So today is all about moving from thinking about what we're doing to communities to what we can do with them. I'm Wendy Agar from Engaged Outcomes, and I'm so excited to have you with us here today for what will be a real power hour. It's going to be 60 minutes of awesomeness from our guest speakers, starting with our keynote, Madie Sturgess, who's the Clean Energy Projects Coordinator for Original Power, through to our expert panel featuring Kathryn Maxwell, who's the President of the Southcoast Health and Sustainability Alliance, and Elizabeth Noble, who's a Director with the Community Power Agency. Before we go any further, though, I'd like to acknowledge that I'm coming to you today from the lands of the Turrbal and Yagara people, and I'd like to acknowledge the land of the people wherever you're calling in from today and pay my respects to them, their culture, and their elders past and present. I'd also like to extend that respect to any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander people on the call today. A huge thank you too to our 2025 series partners, PowerLink and WindLab. Thank you for believing in this work, sharing our vision, and backing a space where we can have honest conversation about what it takes to partner with communities and stand beside them to help them shape a better future. At Engaged Outcomes, we're on a mission to improve the way engagement is done in regional communities, and we're really proud of the Power Hour, that it creates a space for those real conversations, shared learning, and for practical insights as well. Before we get going, a little bit of housekeeping. I just want to let you know we do record this session. I appreciate it that you're all on mute, and we all know that because we've been doing this for years now. And I do love it if your cameras are on so we can see each other and we can pretend we're in a real room. It is on Zoom, which is a little bit different to Teams, and all the emojis are down the bottom and the chat room is down the bottom. And it'd be really lovely before we get started if you could pop in the chat box where you're calling in from today, and maybe even pop a bit of an emoji in there on how you're going, what you're bringing. And oh, you're such a good group. You've been here before. You're already doing it. Good morning, Andrea, Michelle, Elliot, Scott, and Elizabeth has already put her hello in there as well. We love it when you use the chat box. It is designed to be a very interactive session, and your questions are what will make it really purposeful towards the end. So let's get started while you're all saying hello in the chat box. I really am so excited to welcome Madie Sturgess. As I said, she's the Clean Energy Projects Co-Director for Original Power. She's a clean tech specialist with a career spanning tech startups, agriculture, media, and international development. She's worked on everything from microgrid projects in remote Haitian communities through to driving energy innovation and policy reform for agriculture and communities in regional Queensland. Madie is not only an amazing powerhouse, she hasn't got that in her CV, but that's not her intro. She's amazing. Madie's passionate about fit for purpose solutions for sustainable development, the democratization of energy, and the larger transition to circular economies, none of which is possible without including the communities that these serve. So she is absolutely the perfect person for our keynote today. Welcome, Madie.
Thank you very much for that incredibly generous introduction. I'll try and live up to it. I'm just giving me one moment to set up the screen. Sorry, won't be a sec. There we go. Beautiful. Okay. And I'm also on Yagara and Turrbal country today. I'm here in Meanjin and similarly recognize the elders and community leaders, past, present, and emerging on this country and all the countries that you come from today. I work with Original Power, as Wendy mentioned before, as co-director of Clean Energy Projects. Original Power is an Indigenous-led nonprofit, and we focus on working alongside First Nations communities to co-design energy solutions that are suited directly for that community, making sure that First Nations participation and benefit in the energy transition is in alignment with the self-determination and the aspirations of First Nations people. And as Wendy mentioned before, the transition, is here. It's happening. It's a lot about decarbonisation. We also know that it's about decentralising the way energy works a little bit. But when we talk about the transition, I think, it's kind of selling it a bit short about the opportunity that's on the table. We talk about in a lot of our work, the ability to democratise how people interact with the energy system. And for those who, I know this next word is scary for some people, but there's also an opportunity here to decolonize the way energy systems have been designed and how they can be designed to be better in the future for those who have been historically and culturally disenfranchised from the mainstream ways of engaging with energy. But fundamentally, all of that means that we're in a transformational moment. This isn't just transitioning laterally from one energy type to another.
Right.
This is fundamentally shifting the way communities, households, consumers all orient towards energy, and the ability to increase and leverage greater agency for communities in these energy systems. So what does this opportunity look like? Well, I think first we have to look at the energy pain points. What are people currently experiencing across the energy system? If you're in a remote First Nations community in Australia, you probably, paying for your energy via a prepay meter. Just like a prepay phone, you run out of credit, the lights go off. That is highly disruptive to the well-being of households and communities. Regional communities, this isn't your first time going through some kind of transitional transformation relating to energy. If you're from Darling Downs like I am, that gas resource boom and bust has a profound impact on communities, for better and for worse. Farmers' yields are actually quite, depending on the commodity, quite dependent on how much water you can afford to pump. So how much the cost of electricity actually tangibly impacts I guess the profitability and the food security of Australia. That's something that, is an incredible pain point for farmers. And I'm thinking about the Mackay region. Land rights of traditional owners has been historically pretty soundly ignored when, the last time we went through this massive infrastructure rollout, whether native title exists or not, it's been a pretty underappreciated and respected part of rolling out energy infrastructure. And I don't think this one is a respecter of region, particularly as climate change, has its increasing intensity of impacts. The vulnerability of communities is only increasing. And if you're in a regional or remote community, resilience is something that is front of mind for a lot of communities. I'm thinking about Far North Queensland, anyone that hits the wet season pretty profoundly, Malakuta during the bushfires, it's everywhere and it's hard to ignore. So if we're actually taking a transformation approach to the energy transition, that looks like we can actually totally shift the value bases of our energy market. And what are the transparency mechanisms that we can use to change how value is recognized and respected in the energy market to reflect how consumers and prosumers operate. How can we make sure our workforce transitions from a local perspective, not just this big picture top-down perspective? How can we make sure that actually this doesn't become another extractive exercise out of our local communities, and make sure you're retaining as much of that investment in local communities that are really hosting and holding the lion's share of what the transition is? How can we build climate resilience and adaptation out of these energy systems and the way they're designed? How can energy upgrades and retrofitting in homes compound the affordability opportunities of the transition? And how can water security, and food security be unlocked if we're designing our energy systems in the right way? And all of that, if designed well, can unlock so much more productivity at the local level when we're taking a more transformational and holistic approach. And so I guess at the end of it, it really is just about taking a consumer-centric approach and making sure we're driving for consumer-centric outcomes, and not just for the developers to tick their box and for the RET targets to be achieved. That is actually not what successful outcomes are. They're a portion of it, but what is the consumer actually experiencing at the end of the day? And so a way that we can approach this is looking at community energy. So we're drilling back down to this community level. What is it? It's a local and collaborative approach to designing and developing energy initiatives, often place-based planning and investment. Often the community is wholly or co-owning that energy initiative. It's situated in or next to the community, and the benefit is directly to the community and is designed to directly hit the community. And quite often, not always, but if it's designed at best practice, it's often in pursuit of inclusive and equitable outcomes for community members. So there on the side, there's a list of the different ways that, communities can take up community energy initiatives. It's not just getting infrastructure on the ground. It's also things like retrofitting and efficiency upgrades. And it's also things like the community having the first right of refusal to invest in large scale, solar and wind that's coming into their community. Some of the benefits are there. I think, you can probably already understand what those would be, and jobs and equity building, all those sorts of things. Another one is grid efficiency. So if you're actually designing at this distribution and community level, you might not actually have to, invest in as much transmission, which saves everyone a lot of money and a lot of heartache. Some of the key challenges, it's not tech. The tech is not the problem. More than anything, it's regulation, and then the impacts that regulation has on the commercials. And when we talk about the commercials and the commercials being tricky, it's just a byproduct of the regulation. So where you have a monopolized utility, which is the case in Queensland, for example, and a lot of other states, usually they have unregulated networks, which means that the balance of power between the utility and the off-taker isn't actually balanced. These legal protections aren't there, which becomes an investment risk. There's regulatory uncertainty around the processes to take on these sorts of projects, which means the costs go up, which means the whole transaction cost is more expensive than it should be. And people use that as a reason or a justification to not pursue a mid-scale or a community scale project. But actually, the cause of that isn't that the commercials are off. The cause of that is the reg is perversely incentivizing the commercials of projects of this size. So how do we enable community energy when we have these regulatory and then, subsequently commercial risks? Resourcing for community and benefits planning right up the top should be just happening in every state, whether you're pursuing community energy or not. If you need to engage a community on anything to do with the transition, communities should be well resourced to do community planning. And that's different to local council planning. That's also important, but a local council isn't the same thing as a community. And I think that's a very important difference to make there. Fund or funds for feasibility studies at the community level or for access to expertise is also profoundly helpful in building a pipeline of projects that then, improves the commerciality of these projects and the replicability of these projects. There's 3 items just there on regulatory reform that I think are really helpful levers. Making sure that the assessment process is size appropriate, legal protections, and that actually the full value of these projects is actually being recognised in commercial agreements and the market levers. Templates for ownership and the regulatory processes go a long way. If the regulators have a think about it at the start, it really does go a long way for those who are pursuing projects. a public underwriting scheme for mid-scale community projects while the market is trying to figure out its new levers for value. Also something that can go a long way. And I think if anyone has been following community energy for quite a while, the local energy plan that I believe Dr. Helen Haynes brought together, quite a lot of people on in 2020, really articulates how a public underwriting scheme for community projects is a really great enabler of unlocking these projects at scale. In the UK, in certain regions, if you're a large-scale proponent and you're going into a community or impacting a community, the right of first refusal of communities to co-invest into your project must occur, which I think is actually a really overlooked part of how we are planning for social license and community benefit in this transition. And yeah, so I'll just leave that on the table as a thought bubble that we can maybe come back to at some other time. And I can see a little idea bubble above Elliot's head there as well after that. So I'll prepare for a question on that front. But also local job strategies and the development of local job strategies, not just for construction, not just for maintenance, because as we know, the maintenance for these sorts of projects are comparatively low. But actually, there's a massive amount of work and actually a GDP injection when you start to take in the jobs required for retrofitting and upgrading homes to be as efficient as possible. I believe ACOS several years ago, maybe 3 years ago it was, I might be wrong on the timing, but they funded a study as to I guess the GDP injection and its value for just for social homes to retrofit and do efficiency upgrades. It was valued about $17 billion of an injection to the economy. That's just social housing. So there is a lot when it comes to jobs and proper transformation if we design this beyond just new infrastructure on the ground. Some practical insights, really like developing just internal cultural competency for liaising with and planning with and supporting the engagement of communities full stop. We're not perfect at this yet. This is why the industry is screaming out saying social license is hard, because this one point alone is still hard for so many developers. And that doesn't even then start to account for the diverse community voices that also need to be accommodated in the planning of community engagement, whether it be community-led proponents, large-scale proponents, and everything in between. The recognition, protection, and preservation of cultural heritage and land stewardship is a non-negotiable if you're doing things just even, ideal practice, not even gold star. That is a non-negotiable. And off the back of that is free, prior, informed consent practices with First Nations communities. It also should kind of be a practice everywhere, frankly. Clear, frequent, accessible, and accurate information should be provided to everyone throughout this process. The support of a community planning process, as I mentioned before, which is different to an LGA strategic plan, and meaningfully sharing the benefits with impacted communities, which I think avoiding like a sugar rush is what I mean by that. Not just a grant fund where I know we talk about we're not doing footy jerseys anymore, but a community grant fund that just, deploys a pool and then there's no O&M funding for it afterwards is also kind of the same problem. And so just on the right column there, some of the steps that we take as an organisation to co-design with community. It's pretty straightforward stuff. And very happy for these slides to be circulated, and I'm sure it'll be available in the recording. Here are 3 case studies. The Marlinger and Borroloola ones, I'll just admit, are my projects, our organisation's projects. So I think this is the time to toot our own horn a little bit. But I think just as importantly as the Yakandanda project as well, these are all varying scales of community-led initiatives. Marlinger and Borroloola, while they are both microgrids, they're also designed to reduce the bill significantly. In the case of Marlinger, up to 70% of current energy expenditure is being saved or reduced as a result of the revenue from that community energy project. In both of those communities, there is energy productivity initiatives that are coming off the back of that. So again, efficiency and retrofitting programs will come off the back of those investments. In Yakandanda, they've taken a whole of community transition and transformation approach. There's a VPP, there's community batteries, EV chargers, efficiency programs, there's bill savings. It is community-led. And the income from these projects are being reinvested back into their community. So again, avoiding a wholesale extraction of benefit out of the community, and securing and reinvesting as much of it as possible at the community level, which I think is just so critical. And so I guess bring it all back home, because I know I've got mere seconds left. The reason why community energy is so important is because this is an opportunity to reinvest in and revitalize the communities that have often been overlooked, have been extracted from and left behind, and will be the most heavily impacted by the transition. Whether you're a host community or whether you're a community that has been historically disenfranchised, that equity gap is at risk of being even greater. But I think there's a lot of communities that are really starting to get stubborn about making sure they're not left behind, and in fact they're leaders in their future and the choices that their community gets to make in energy going forward. I'll leave it there, and I'm sure there'll be some questions later on. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Madie. I'm certain there will be as well, and I'm pleased you answered the question about sharing the slides. I definitely will make sure that we send them out with the follow-up email because they're fantastic. I'd forgotten about your 4Ds: democratise, decarbonise, decolonise, and decentralise. We're all leaving with dot points on that. And transformation rather than transition. It was, as expected, a fabulous presentation and a wonderful way to start our session today. We're going to move on now to our panel. So I'd like to invite to the virtual podium, Kathryn and Elizabeth. We all should pop up in a second. And please remember to pop your questions in the chat box, because when Kathryn and Elizabeth have finished, we'll go to question time. So thank you for being here, ladies. I really appreciate you joining us. I'm going to introduce you one at a time and ask you a couple of questions. So I might start with you, Kathryn. So everyone, this is Kathryn Maxwell. She is the president of Southcoast Health and Sustainability Alliance, or SHASA as they're known. She's been the president for the last 3 years, although she's been a member for a lot longer. She has a really amazing background that we can't go into today, but she brings deep experience in community development and sustainability, including her time as a sustainability manager with New Zealand's Department of Conservation, where she oversaw the country's largest off-grid solar project. Kathryn's passionate about building a resilient Eurobodella through generating local power, growing local food, and keeping benefits in the community. Thank you so much for joining us today, Kathryn.
Thank you, Wendy. Happy to be here.
Well, that's what everyone says up front. Let's see. So tell us all a bit about SHASA and why you involved, Kathryn.
Well, SHASA, as you mentioned, is in the Eurobodella. It's on the south coast of New South Wales, and it was set up in 2014, actually after a climate walk. People wanted to see action occurring on the ground, climate action, and so this group is about undertaking practical projects to achieve a more resilient community and a low-carbon economy in the Eurobodella. I became involved with SHASA in 2017 after retiring, and I joined for two reasons. One, I wanted to use all the skills I'd gained over the last 30 years to benefit our community, but also I wanted to engage with other like-minded people. And one of the most amazing things is just the people that I get to work with collectively to get these great community outcomes.
So it's interesting. I see comparisons between Eurobodella and Yakadanda, which Madie mentioned there. And I must give a bit of a plug. We're into our third season of the Empower podcast. And interestingly, it's Matt and Matt from Totally Renewable Yak who are in this week's episode. So jump on when you leave here. And there is parallels because they talk about that same thing, Kathryn. A large number of educated people in the community really helped with them getting traction, which I know when we talk about, so over the last 11 years, what changes has SHASA driven in your community and your region, and what do you see as the main benefits?
Okay, well, some of the key things we've done, we've been getting solar and batteries installed on homes and community organisations. We've upgraded a number of community organisations to operate as bushfire and heatwave havens. We've run a number of electric vehicle expos. We run a weekly repair cafe so people can get their items repaired rather than thrown out. We run a weekly food program collect food from the supermarkets and distribute to low-income households. We run a pet support program for low-income households because we know the cost of keeping a pet keeps rising, and pets are really critical to people's well-being. And we provide high-quality information to all our stakeholders through our website, Facebook page, and our regular newsletter. And we do some advocating, very practical advocating at our local, state, and federal level. So our first project was a solar bot buy. We got 50 households to get solar on at a discount. We've so far secured 63 grants for funding worth about $7.5 million that's been injected into our community. And we've installed solar and battery on 25 community facilities. So everything ranging from marine rescue, surf clubs, churches, CWAs, men's sheds. Anybody out there with a community facility, we'll try and help them. And these havens that we've done are really important. These bushfire and heatwave havens, we've done a number of things. We've put in independent power systems so they can operate when the power goes down, which inevitably happens during a big event. But they've also got air conditioning and air filters, because the two things during our big bushfires in 1920 that actually killed a lot more people was the heat and the smoke. So these facilities will enable people to get out of that. But we've also done things like electrical upgrades, LED lighting, kitchen upgrades, awnings, whatever is needed to get that facility in place to be able to operate in future, climate events. And the benefits to our community have been reduced emissions, very importantly, cut the operational costs for community organisations so that they can keep doing the wonderful things they do for the community. We've, as I said, set up these havens for future climate disasters. We've increased the number of electric vehicles in the Eurobodalla, and we have one of the highest numbers of EV chargers for a regional area, and that's by our lobbying council and others to do more in that space.
Oh, that's amazing. I was jotting down some notes. It aligns very much with what Madie talked about. You're showing the way, you're demonstrating the power, and you are retrofitting to reduce cost. It's a big part of your project. So what do you think of the success factors for SHASA? So what's been important for you guys to turn your vision into real community-led change?
Yeah. Well, I think the key one, which you mentioned a bit earlier, is having the skills and capacity of your volunteers. We've got a number of retired professionals. So everything from accountants to lawyers to engineers, builders, project managers. It really has helped. I've got a strong background in grants. I was on the other side of the fence, and so I have a really good understanding of what funding programs are after and the language that you need to use to get your project over the line. But one of the other ones that's been absolutely vital is partnering with like-minded businesses. So we've been in partnership with Micro Energy Systems. They're a local family business that do electrical upgrades, solar, batteries, EV chargers, all of that. And the other one is Tech Exec, which is an organisation which is working to try and improve digital literacy. And one of the things that we've done with them is we're now getting satellite communication onto our havens, so that if the telecommunications goes out, which happened last time, people will still be able to get onto the internet. They'll be able to get their telecommunications. We've also partnered with our sister organisation, Repower Shoalhaven, Renewables, Cabargo, and more recently with the Eurobodalla Shire Council. So for the first time, we're actually upgrading a council community hall. We're putting on solar batteries and upgrading their kitchen from gas to electric. The other key thing around, I think, success is language. We don't just talk about climate action. We talk about disaster preparedness, community resilience, reducing energy costs, helping with the cost of living, keeping more of the money locally. I think it's just so important, because in a lot of regional communities, there's a lot of, fear around the climate action. It's a cost. Very important to talk about these other benefits. And if you need to, you don't even, in many cases, need to even raise the issue of climate action. I must admit, like with organisations like the CWA, it was the fact of financial viability that really resonated. So you just find out where others are coming from, and you tailor your message to, what will resonate with them, rather than preaching where you're coming from and what gets you up in the morning and motivates you to do things.
Oh, Kathryn, you're a gem. Now, there's people asking us to send some names of the partners. I think I will follow up and get some more information off Kathryn and send it through in the email to you all. Your last question, Kathryn. So why should developers work with existing community-led energy groups?
Well, I think the key thing is you're tapping into the expertise and experience of a local community energy group. For us, we have been very frustrated in not being able to do medium scale renewables, but we've worked hard with the community. We've got landholders on side. We've done a lot of that work. So if they work with us and contact us, they'll be able to get a really good understanding very quickly of where there are receptive communities to things like a solar farm, to things like community scale batteries, rather than going into communities cold. And the other thing is the community groups could do just so much more. If we had that technical and financial support to get these mid-scale renewable projects shovel ready, then we could actually see a lot more happen on the ground. So what we're saying to developers is if you can assist us to get our projects shovel ready, then you'll have enormous investment opportunities as well. Because one of the things that we would look at is a co-investment model of, community investing in to some of these larger scale, like, a 5 megawatt solar farm. And so, we're being held up by that resource constraint. We're ready to do that work. And if we can get assistance to do that work, then there'll be a lot more shovel-ready projects for investors to invest in. And a good example is we know that Flow Power, which is a Canadian super fund, they invested in the big solar farm in Shoalhaven. They're keen to do more investment, but we just don't have shovel-ready projects. And it's that chicken and egg problem. And so if we could get that assistance, that would enable us to really move into that space. We've got the council now saying they're keen for solar farm on council land as well. So there's lots of opportunities. The grid can take it down here. We have no solar farms. So yeah, big plug to the developers. Come our way. I'm sure we could work effectively together to get a good outcome.
Thank you so much, Kathryn. It has been fabulous having you on here today. I've jotted down a couple of notes, and as I've said, I'll get some more information off you that I can share with others. And essentially, that was a great plug for Eurobodella, and also a really great example of how developers could partner. So thank you, Kathryn. I'm sure there'll be lots of questions for you as well as we move towards the end. So let me welcome Elizabeth. I'm going to throw to you now. So please welcome Elizabeth Noble, who's the director at Community Power Agency, where she leads operations and projects like the Socially Responsible Renewable Energy Development course. With more than 20 years experience across Australia, the UK and Asia, she's worked in government, business and not-for-profit sector, and is really passionate about community engagement in the energy transition, making sure that it delivers real environmental and social benefits. So thank you so much for joining us today, Elizabeth.
Thanks for having me, Wendy.
It's a pretty amazing panel that you've been on today. So you're getting to bring it home with your awesomeness.
The other women. Yeah. I actually just had a power cut at home. So I'm now hot spotting and just on my battery. So let's hope this all goes smoothly.
I hope so too. I was having a little heart starting when you disappeared. I can tell you. So I'm delighted you're back.
Yeah.
So to start us off, can you tell everyone a little bit about CPA, Community Power Agency?
Sure. So for those of you who don't know us, CPA is a workers' cooperative. We're also a not-for-profit and a charity. Being a workers' co-op means that we're actually owned and run by our workers. So we really practice shared leadership and democracy in the way that we actually work together, as well in the work that we do with others too. So our vision is that Australian communities are actively participating in the renewable energy transition, not just passive hosts of infrastructure. And our mission is to make sure that the transition is actually designed with communities, not just for them, in the same way that Madie has kind of articulated that. And we do that through a number of different ways. So partnerships is a really important part of our work. So partnering with community, with government, with industry, doing research and advocacy as well to try and shift policy and practice. And then also capacity building. So like our training program around socially responsible renewable energy development, as well as bespoke training. We try to equip people with the skills to engage and shape projects. So for us, at the heart of our work is really energy justice and energy democracy. So those, did you say 4Ds, Madie? We used to have 3Ds, a long time ago.
I added the decolonize for obvious reasons, Liz.
Nice. Yeah, just making sure that renewable energy delivers not just green power, but also social, environmental, and also economic value back to the communities that host this infrastructure.
So it's a lovely segue to, I know that you do a lot of that work. Can you share some of the community-led programs that CPA have been involved in and what you've learnt from your work and research in that space?
Sure. Yeah. So we've been around now for quite a while, about 14 years. So in that time, we've worked with, lots of different community groups like SHASA, helping to navigate the complexity of trying to get projects up and running. So that often means supporting them with the tricky stuff, but, the essential stuff. So legal structures, governance structures, financing models, the business models, and also the community engagement piece as well, so that that local vision and the enthusiasm actually can translate into real operating projects. So our work in the community-led space, it's pretty diverse. It takes different forms depending on the context, but some of you might be familiar with the Haystack Solar Garden, so Australia's first large-scale solar garden. We were involved in co-developing that with a community energy group, Pingala from Sydney, as well as other partners from the Riverina. And I guess the main aim of that project was really about trying to unlock renewables for the 30% of Australians who are still unable to access it. So people who are renting, people who live in apartments, and households that just might not have a suitable roof or just don't have the money to put it on. So this project saw another cooperative formed. So that's a real aim of us as an organisation as well, is to try and see cooperatives used as a legal structure. So the co-op members bought plots in the solar farm and then they received bill credits for the next 10 years. So the important thing though is that those credits can actually move with them if they move house, which makes it possible for renters. They had about 400 members of the co-op. And then Haystacks, it really has been able to show how a community can own and govern a project and benefit from it. Although we'd say it's probably a community scale project. It's relatively small, 1.5 megawatt solar farm, but it's owned by the community themselves. It meets their needs and ensures that they're actually the ones who get the financial benefit from it. So I think what we've learned from that project is that communities, they bring enormous creativity and commitment, but they really need support in navigating the technical and the legal hurdles, and that's where we can come in. But like Kathryn said as well, and Madie too, it's regulatory as well. That project was supremely difficult. It took many years, and it really shouldn't. It didn't need to be as complex as it was. A lot of our work as well is, at the larger scale too. So we're doing some community-led work in renewable energy zones. We've been focused a bit on the New England, and it's a very different context. We're talking about massive projects, billions of dollars of investment, which can, be a huge opportunity, but also, there's serious tensions on the ground in those local communities. So our aim has really been to try and bring together key stakeholders like schools and training providers, First Nations organisations and employment services, as well as developers and business, to try and, we're not looking at direct ownership in these cases, but, looking at collaboration and coordination and trying to make sure that communities can actually have a stronger voice in the way that benefits, are designed for large scale. And, at this stage, it certainly hasn't resolved every tension. Like the New England's a very fraught space, but it has shown that, these kind of community-led approaches through collaboration and shared decision-making can begin to open up pathways where you can develop trust and then see more participation in community actually you know, having a seat at the table.
So, from your experience with all those different projects, how do you think collectively we shift from consultation to true partnering?
Yeah, look, I think that too often consultation just means that communities are asked for feedback, but the decisions have already been made, basically. They're already locked in, and it's this kind of, I think that just ends up fueling more mistrust, really, and people feel sidelined. But if you're talking about true partnership, it's a very different thing. It actually means sharing power, as well as sharing benefits. So, we see sharing power as actually involving communities early. And I know we say that constantly, but it means giving them real influence, like not just telling them what you're doing at the beginning, actually involving them through things like co-ownership, through things like, having advisory roles for community in steering, community reference groups, for example, or just looking at different types of governance structures that actually centre community in a decision-making role. And I think sharing benefit is also, it's very important. And I think a lot of communities aren't feeling like they're seeing that benefit yet. And it means making sure that it stays in the community. People need to see whether it's getting cheaper bills, or there has to be local jobs. There's got to be procurement for local business, and that long-term community program, like Madie said, it's not just doing it for 2 years and then grant funds finish. Sorry, it's like that long-term legacy stuff. So, but I think it's a bit of a difficult thing to achieve given the current kind of structures that we have. Like with large-scale development, developers are under very, very tight timelines, and they have pressure on them from investors. Many of these companies have very centralized decision making, and community engagement is kind of this thing that's pushed to the margins a lot of the time. And I think practitioners want to do better, but without that senior leadership support and also the policy frameworks that enable that, we're not going to see that cultural mindset shift that needs to happen for partnership to really become, commonplace rather than this exception. So overcoming that systemic change is something that, we're really trying to do that at CPA through things like the SRED course, trying to equip practitioners with the skills that they need to do better, but also through advocacy and trying to see, stronger policy and regulation around things like mandated benefit sharing, community ownership actually being, possibly mandated or a carve out, and yeah, just clearer expectations, I think, from government around what meaningful engagement actually looks like. So yeah, there's a really good business case. We know that it saves money if you do this well, and, take that effort up front. You can reduce conflict, avoid delays, but, build trust long term. But yeah, I think there's systemic support that needs to be put in place for that to happen.
It certainly is cultural, isn't it? So I've got the beautiful segue to your last question, and then I'm going to throw to the floor. So those of you who are sitting out there, pop your questions in the chat. This is a incredible panel that you will not see together on any other conference, and we've got them all here at our fingertips today. So pop your questions through. My last one is for you, Elizabeth. Combining that practical knowledge and the fact you guys run that amazing program, if you were giving advice to an engagement practitioner or a developer getting involved with a community partnership, what are the top 3 things you'd want them to know or to do? And maybe this might be one I'll send the warning bell, Kathryn and Madie. You might want to. What are your top 2 tips for people wanting to partner? I'll start with you, Elizabeth.
Sure. Have I got top 2 or top 3?
Yeah, top 2. See, I'm
Top 2.
I'm democratizing. Everyone gets
okay.
a go now.
I might try and smush it together. I'd say listening deeply and investing in the relationships with community. I think that's really important for developers out on the ground, showing clearly how their input actually shapes decisions. They need that feedback loop. it's, you know, and there's so much fatigue around consultation. People need to feel like they're heard, but then see something happening. There needs to be that connection. And, you know, the other one I would say is, you know, sharing power and sharing value. I think communities don't just want to be heard, they want to actually be involved in shaping things. And if we do that, you know, we end up with not just a cleaner electricity system, but much stronger and resilient communities alongside that as well.
Beautiful. Thank you, Elizabeth. I don't know, Madie and Kathryn, do you want to jump in with what you think your top 2 tips are for partnering or engaging with communities?
Who do you want to go first?
You go, Kathryn.
Okay. First one is invest in your volunteers, celebrate your achievements, have social events, and we always have an end of year party for all of our SHASA members. And the second one is persistence. The first time I contacted CWA Maria about upgrading their building, they went, oh no, we don't want solar. They got a change of their board. And then when I came back, they were very keen. So just be aware the landscape does change, and it could be, you know, just because you failed doing it 5 years ago, don't think that it's not worth trying again.
Wow, there's some transferables there for industry for sure, as well as community. Thank you so much, Kathryn and Madie. And then I've got a question for you, Madie, from Donovan. So,
Sure. I think for communities, be more stubborn than the challenges, because they're going to be used as every reason not to keep going. But those challenges are often quite temporary things. They're just regulation, and regulation changes every day. So be more stubborn than the challenge. And for developers, you know, communities know their place better than you will, and better than any desktop study will, and better than any multiple trips that a community engagement person might take to that community. So if you actually partner in a really genuine way, you are getting richer outcomes in your planning, you're identifying the impact and the ideal project outcomes if you have genuine partnership. There is real wisdom and insight that is long held by people who live in that place and experience that place. And I think it's a real missed opportunity if you don't partner genuinely. And communities will know if it's not genuine. So you kind of can't just skirt around it and extract what you think and think you'll get it all. So yeah, be genuine about it.
beautiful. Beautiful. Be more stubborn than the challenges. I might actually put that up on my computer as a note to self. Okay, so there's lots of rich questions coming through. I'll start with you, Madie. And we've got time's always tricky on these calls, isn't it? We've got I'm going to give us 5 minutes we've got. So Madie, this is your dot point answers. How do you negotiate community-owned assets with DNSPs, which result in revenue generated from the asset being reinvested into the community, or at least offsetting local energy costs?
Yep. So I'll be as quick as possible. So if you're a community proponent, you've got to cover the cost of your capital. You've got to cover your operational costs, any replacement costs and risk costs. That is kind of just a non-negotiable of just, if you're going to be a community proponent, that's your starting point. You've also got to understand what are the economic levers of your counterparty, and preempt that. And then you kind of just got to negotiate into the middle. Basically, that's how that works. The community benefit portion is either you know, an additional price factored into your negotiating price, or it's a separate program that you negotiate together and how you want to deliver it. In the case of our Borroloola project and our Marlinger project, it is realised as a prepay meter credits to the household, because the household, you know, affordability was the key outcome that the community was looking for, and so that's what we were given a mandate to go and negotiate on behalf of. No reason why you couldn't have that, and you have a community fund where, for example, you fund and invest in energy efficiency rollout, for example. But we have a cooperative owned approach, as Elizabeth has mentioned as well. So a community cooperative makes a decision about what is their remit to act as a, you know, community decision-making collective. And so where that reinvestment goes is determined by that community.
Fabulous. Thanks, Madie. All right, here's one which probably is an Elizabeth and a Madie one, and I can see Kathryn typing away there at the bottom. Okay, so Richard wants to know, when you have a private developer trying to develop a large-scale project encountering resistance from a community experiencing cumulative impact of multiple projects, is co-ownership still a potential way to resolve this resistance, or is it too late by this stage?
Interesting. Definitely don't think it's too late by that stage. I also don't necessarily think that co-ownership is going to be the answer either, because it really depends on the context. And people may not want to have an ownership stake, but they may want to still have influence, and they may want to invest as well. They may want to get a financial return without, the burden of actually having to be involved in governance. So I think it's very, very much context specific. But I wouldn't think that it's too late. Definitely not. I don't know, Madie, you got any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, this fatigue is everywhere, right? And I think if you're a First Nations group, for example, what you could probably look at is, well, our land lease as a landholder is our first step of being an equity stakeholder. And so whoever's willing to take up that opportunity will probably prioritize negotiating with you about what our collaboration could look like. That is not, that would be an avenue that you could potentially use. And again, it's about that shift in power and decision making. We might not be an owner, but what it might be is some sort of contribution for a benefit outcome, and you're rewarding whoever is honouring, land rights and community participation in decision making. Yeah, so I think sometimes that is the circuit breaker of, instead of just being constantly put upon, here is what we want as a community, who's willing to play ball. Yeah. But no, it doesn't mean it's that easy, that's for sure.
So here's one from Sally, and I think we'll see how we're going for time after that. So Sally's asked, one of the challenges for large-scale energy projects is that developers must lock in land owners before the project can be announced to the public. This is super frustrating in terms of gaining community trust. Any tips? We're asking the light, simple questions today.
Yeah, I think this is.
So you go, Liz.
So you go first, Madie.
No, go.
Well, I think it kind of speaks to, what I was saying about some of the systemic issues and the timelines as well. So, yeah, in conversations with developers, this comes up all the time, that it's really hard to share information early on. And it can be extremely divisive when you're having those conversations with specific landholders, but information can't be shared more broadly. I guess what I would say is, whatever you can share, you should be sharing, and it might be even saying that this is what we don't know at the moment. There's information that, like if people are seeing you in the community, they're already going to be asking a lot of questions amongst themselves. So how do you begin those conversations and be transparent, even though you can't, it's not being announced publicly yet, because it will be spoken about regardless. So I think just really being clear with people about what you're doing, and yeah, just not being covert really. And I understand it's a really tricky space to be working in. Yeah, you have there's things you just can't say. So.
Yeah, I mean, small town gossip travels pretty quickly, doesn't it? And transparency over pretty much everything else. But I also think locking in the landowners before the project can be announced. I mean, my general attitude is whoever you are having to negotiate on that front with, yeah, you probably should actually have to have a pretty mature relationship with whoever that entity is. And it should be happening as early as possible and be as rich and as meaningful as early as possible. And in fact, our experience in the First Nations Clean Energy Network, which is our policy advocacy and community engagement membership arm, is that the earlier developers engage landholders, whether they are traditional owners or not, you're going to find that your cultural heritage approvals and any other land-based approvals go much quicker and actually end up being some of the easiest parts of your process. So I actually don't necessarily think this is a problem if you're doing it the right way and doing it as early as possible, because alternatively what tends to happen is it gets shoehorned right in at the end and it ends up being blamed as the reason why projects stall and delay. And that's not to say any of this is easy, small scale or large scale, but actually I think this is one of the most important relationships to get right as early as possible.
Thank you so much, ladies. Thank you so much. I'm so appreciative that we've had such incredible wisdom with us today. Madie, Kathryn, and Elizabeth, this has been one of the fantastic power hours, and I'm going to be so excited to get this recording up because, as we were saying offline earlier, this is a lasting resource that really can be shared with people who weren't able to join us, and this one is a cracker. So thank you so much, ladies.
Well,
Thank you
Wendy.
so much for having us,
Thanks.
Wendy. Thanks very
Wendy.
much for attending.
I'm going to hand over now to one of our partners as we come to the end of this session. So WindLab and, whoops, we're transitioning at the moment. WindLab and PowerLink are our partners this year. And I'm going to hand over to Elliot Williamson-Bell, who's the Senior Community Manager with WindLab. He's going to come to the virtual podium and share some quick insights as we come towards the end of this session. Thanks,
Wonderful.
Elliot.
Thanks very much, Wendy. And look, thank you very much, Kathryn, Madie, and Elizabeth. It's such a fantastic session. I've been more excited about this one, I'll be honest, than any of the others, because I think as developers, we're always at the podium. We're always the ones up, and it's always focused on about how can we engage with communities better, and how can communities prepare themselves to engage with us. But what I loved about today is that it's actually it's the opposite of that. It's how can communities do this for themselves and experience the benefits for themselves. It's and I think that's a really great. That's why I said I was very excited about it, and yeah, I think some of the work you do is amazing. I do know that we're short on time, so I'm just going to hit the top three that were for me. And I think, Madie, I think, yeah, we spoke before, there's so much great content there and so many great ideas, but even just at the very base of it, that how we look at this, we talk about it as a transition, but that transformation of what it actually could be. And a transition is such a you know, it doesn't have the same kind of power, but there is opportunities here to bring whole communities on board, and they can actually experience the benefits of having, you've got a wind farm over there, but you've still got inequitable access to efficient and reliable and inexpensive power at the next door property. You know, there's an opportunity for us to kind of redress that balance with this transformation. I think that's great. Kathryn, the big takeaway from, thank you so much for sharing. It's I spent a lot of time as a young boy down in Mollymook, and I know how beautiful that part of the world is. And I'm so glad to hear what you've been doing down there. And it's just that idea that we talk about the climate goals and the climate net zero and all these very high level things, but I think bringing it down to that, how it actually impacts individual people in every facet of life. You know, the cost of looking after your dog. That's something I hadn't even considered, but these are decisions that we have that are having to be made of how people prioritize their needs, and a lot of that is driven by cost of living, and you need power, and you need to have the lights on, and you need to have heat, and even right through to that, you know, how you talk to people about it being the disaster preparedness or the cost savings, or you know, local resilience for communities, I think is such a great thing to make it resonate and motivate people to take a leading role in changing those things for themselves and their community. And finally, Elizabeth, thank you for calling out the fact that consultation is always on developers' terms. That's 100%. That's correct. I don't think it's a model. It's an accepted model, but I think it's that idea of going out early and that sharing power and sharing value, and that cultural mindset change at the decision-making level, I think is very important. And that last conversation that we had just earlier about, I fully support the idea that the industry needs, as we developers need to challenge this held view that you can't go too early, because there are ways of doing it. Renewable have done it on the 2 of our projects, and we've seen the benefits. We've seen faster approvals. We've seen better community support. We've seen, you want to tackle it from a developer perspective, you get a longer view of your risk. You got a better chance to manage it. So I fully support that view that consultation needs to be brought out for what it is, and we need to challenge the idea that of when and how developers go out to talk to communities. But yeah, thank you so much. I really enjoyed today. Really did. Lost for words, which is unusual. So.
Thank you so much, Elliot, especially when you're a bit voluntold to jump on today. You've done it with good grace.
Right.
Thank you so much. So as we come to the close this afternoon, pressing the wrong button there. Thank you so much for joining us for this 5th Power Hour. I hope that you're leaving with some fresh insights and some practical strategies for your engagement toolkit, and also really inspired that we can think differently about this. As Elliot just said, thinking about transformation rather than just transition. I certainly wrote down tons of notes today as well, and look forward to watching the recording. So if today's sparked some ideas for you, I'd love to talk to you about how we can help, whether it's facilitating conversations or empowering leaders, or doing some training around understanding how to work better in the regions. I'd love to hear from you. So thank you to our speakers, thank you to our supporters, PowerHour, PowerLink and WindLab. Our next session is October 16th at 9:30. And we keep an eye out for the email, because our topic is still under wraps. We hope that we have a very exciting group of speakers for next month. And you'll receive an email with the link. We encourage you to share the resource with everyone. It's free, it's available. And this one, like the others, has been amazing. And we love that it exists there for other people to learn who weren't able to join us. So thank you once again for joining us. I look forward to seeing you in October, and have a wonderful morning. Thank you.
Goodbye all.
Yes, see you. Enjoy your day.